Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of Make Every Second Count Live, the show where we try to help you deal with the things you are dealing with. Now, I am your host, Jeff Marconette Jr., also known as the award-winning international Make Every Second Count speaker. And I ask you, if you would please share this episode out, let other people know they need to watch it because it is going to be powerful. I promise you that. Now, I also ask you to please keep the comments coming. Like, get me off track here because that would be interesting. And then I also ask if you would please hit that like button and keep them coming. Help us trick the algorithms. So, with no further ado, I would like to bring to the stage Amy. Hi, Amy. How are
Hi,
you?
Jeff. I'm well. How are you?
Oh, I am fantastic.
Good,
It's good to
good.
see you on here tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy evening to be here with me and my guests. Now, while you go through a short introduction, you're going to tell your name, you're going to tell where you're from, what you do, and more importantly, why you do what you do. And I'm going to be trying to invite a few people on my phone.
Okay,
All
I
right?
can do that.
Thank you.
My name is Amy Carpenter, and I'm an author and an educator. And I've been working for the past several years with schools and youth organizations, teaching teenagers and young adults about sexual ethics, personal safety, sexual assault awareness, and really how each of them can approach relationships from a more confident perspective. Because teenagers need a lot of help with that. They're getting a lot of false messages and a lot of negative hype from the media, and they're struggling with that. So we have been really honored. Our program, Be Strong, Be Wise, has recently received the beautiful accolade of actually lowering school-wide sexual aggression in students. So sexual acting out behavior school-wide was lowered after we were in that school delivering our program. So
Wow.
I'm really passionate about it. I'm really excited about it.
That's awesome.
My background is that I'm a psychotherapist and a youth advocate. So I've done a lot of family therapy, a lot of parent coaching, all kind of leading up to this moment in time where I get to bring some of those skills to the classroom working with young people.
That is fantastic. I have to say, you're doing phenomenal work, and I know from looking at your website that you seem to have all of it together. It's pretty freaking awesome. You guys should go check out her two websites. Her first one is amycarpenter.net, and that is a pretty cool one because that has the full bio and it also tells what books she has written. And then we have the bestrongbewise.com. And again, that is pretty amazing because that helps with sexual efficacy in schools. So I think that is pretty awesome. So, Amy, I have to ask. All right, so when I was 17 years old, I was in a severe car accident. It nearly ended my life, and instead, it left me in a coma for 2.5 months, in the hospital 3.5 months. I was told that I wouldn't walk again, but here I am. And I know that I have had to learn things to get through what I have gone through. So, has there been anything that that has taught you lessons in life to get to where you are now?
I love that question, and I do talk a lot about that question and the answer in both books in the Be Strong, Be Wise series. But um, kind of going way back in time, I'm a survivor myself. I was assaulted in childhood. And I didn't really put together how much that impacted my life because I never talked about it, as a lot of victims don't. I never talked about it until well into my 20s. And fast forward another 20 or so years, I was raising my then 17-year-old daughter, working primarily in the realm of trauma treatment because I was a therapist working with survivors of sexual assault when my daughter was sexually assaulted.
Oh,
And
I'm so sorry.
it was a very difficult emotional chapter for me, I will say, and she's given me full license to talk about it, or I wouldn't be talking about it.
Right.
But it was a very preventable assault. And if the stories in both of the books, and I don't use that term lightly because there are a lot of assaults that are not preventable.
Yeah.
But this particular experience that my daughter went through, it happened in a very public place. It was a church soup kitchen where she was volunteering. And there were 50 soup kitchen attendees there. There were classmates, there were teachers, and there were church personnel. And still, this person who was there at the time, an older man, had the opportunity to groom her and basically usher her into a private part of the church where he touched her inappropriately. So again, her assault, and I really have to stress this point for survivors because I'm sure you have survivors listening. Her assault was atypical. It was public. She was able to report it right away. She had teachers there who helped her report it, and the person was caught, and there was a conviction. So very atypical story, and she actually kind of recovered a little bit more quickly than I even did because it was so public. I had a very difficult emotional time. And so when you ask that question, I that story is the most impactful piece of what was happening in my life at that time because I realized, I've been responding to assault for all these years. And now it's time to do something about preventing it. And I just got, kind of obsessive about my training and my research. And, long story short, we now have these 2 books in this program. And so it's been able, and I think your story is probably similar. I've been able to flip it and feel hope that there's a pathway that I know works and that there's things that we adults can do to help teenagers. So that's a long answer to a short
Yeah.
question. But yeah,
No.
there's
I find that to be a phenomenal answer because it actually answered my question. Some people I have on here don't seem to answer my questions, but that's all right. I deal with it.
yeah.
Um, but I thank you so much for getting out there and showing people that, hey, I have these stories, I've lived through this stuff, and I'm still here. I'm still fighting, and we can change life. We can prevent these things from happening. And that is pretty amazing in itself. But another thing that we like to do on here is try to help people once they have dealt with something. Now, they might not have dealt with a sexual assault because I know I haven't dealt with the sexual assault. And what do you have any suggestions for people that are going through a sexual assault on how to get back to life as they see it now? Or do you have, and then do you have tips for people that aren't going through a sexual assault?
I could probably talk about that one question for an hour, so you may have to cut me short. But there's so many things to say, and most importantly, 100% of the time, in 100% of cases, it is never the victim's fault. And I think that even though we say that a lot, we can't say it enough because our legal system doesn't support survivors. Um, 1 out of 1,000, I think actually it's 5 out of 1,000 offenders actually serve jail time. The ACLU estimates that 95% of rapes on college campuses go unreported. So this is a massive epidemic in our country, and we don't have the legal structure to support victims. And so consequently, people don't want to report it, understandably. So I think that, it's the job is not on the victim to figure out the system. The job for the victim is to figure out what they need and who their support people are. Who are their safe people? And if you only have one person in your life that you trust and you feel safe with, I would encourage survivors to find that one person and try and talk about what happened. It's very difficult for victims to talk about an assault, and often it takes some time afterwards. And so being patient with that process, giving yourself the support you need along the way, whatever self-care feels good for you. But I do think that finding that person to talk about the experience with is really important. And if you can, try and report it. That's a big if. So it has to be at the person's own time frame and at their own level of readiness. But there is something, and having worked with survivors for so long, there is something impactful to making that report, because it's exercising human agency and saying, this happened to me and I'm going to speak about it and hopefully keep it from happening to somebody else. But again, just to stress, that is not a requirement, because people have to be ready for that. And it's our police department and our legal system that has the obligation to serve survivors, not the other way around. So we've got some work on that. Lots of good therapy.
Wait, I have a question.
Okay.
What do you think is the best way for us to approach our local law enforcement, or even bigger law enforcement, to treat those things, to figure out how we can help these people?
Yeah, that's a great question, and not a short answer either. But I'll refer, because I'm not working with law enforcement, but I will refer to somebody who is. There's a researcher named Dr. Ruth Campbell. She's a neuropsychologist, and she's doing amazing work with law enforcement, because what she's doing is she's helping people understand trauma. And there are certain realities that happen to the brain when there is severe trauma, like a sexual assault, that are important for law enforcement to understand. For example, if you have just experienced assault, you're not going to necessarily have the cognitive ability to remember everything that happened in a sequential order, because trauma, it's almost like it kind of jumbles the brain a little bit.
Yeah.
So what law enforcement's learning from folks like Dr. Campbell is that it takes some time for the brain to, kind of reset itself on the heels of a traumatic event. And so, for example, law enforcement who witness a murder are given 48 hours before they have to return to active duty. And what Dr. Campbell's trying to point out is, this is the same thing for survivors. They need some time and they need some patience. And the line of questioning, like, how much did you have to drink and were you flirting with that person, does not help the cause of getting that person to speak the truth.
Yeah.
And it's tricky, because that's part of the legal process. That's part of an investigation, is to get that information, because it's going to show up in court. But there's a way of doing it in a gentle fashion. And so I give a lot of credit to folks like Ruth Campbell, who are really trying to help law enforcement help victims.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That is so understandable. And I get what you're saying. The amount of alcohol and the flirting that these people may or may not have done shouldn't matter at all. I mean, if they say no, it's a no. And that doesn't matter what they drank. That doesn't matter if they flirted.
Right.
That should just all stop.
Right. So I totally agree, and I want to go back just to one other point in answering your earlier question about what can survivors do to help themselves. Um, there's a lot of statistics on this and research, but what Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who's one of the leading pioneers on trauma, what he is finding is that yoga and meditation. So for sure, trauma therapy, for sure, finding a good, safe person to talk to, but learning how to inhabit your body is so important for people who have experienced assault because their body's been invaded, right? And
Yes.
so learning how they can inhabit their body again in a way that feels safe and comfortable for them is really important. And that can be yoga, it can be other types of body work, but that's a super important piece.
I think that one of the main things with yoga and meditation is a mindfulness and the living in the moment kind of thing. Do you think that is something that people like survivors should do? And do you think that is something that everybody should do, even if they're not survivors?
Yeah, I mean, as I'm a yoga teacher myself, I'm not currently teaching, but I've been trained to teach, and I'm an avid practitioner. So I'm a full believer. I was a convert 30 years ago. So I definitely think that yoga is helpful for everybody. I will say that for survivors, it's a matter of knowing yourself and what you need. So, for example, there are poses in yoga that are very vulnerable. And it may be that survivors don't want to do those poses.
Oh,
I
that's
won't go into
fine.
detail. There's it's very easy to research, but there are poses that are much more vulnerable with certain parts of the body. So that doesn't mean don't practice yoga. It means that you get to have agency around what poses you want to do and how often you want to practice. And maybe yoga's not even your thing. Maybe, jogging's your thing or walking's your thing. But I do think finding some kind of body work is really important in that recovery process following
So,
trauma.
so would working out at a gym also do the same kind of thing?
Somebody said it once really well. They said working out in the gym when it comes to this particular piece will get you there. It might just take a little longer because you're working on more of the like physical fitness versus the mindfulness and the centering that yoga offers. So it's not that it's bad or wrong or anything like that. Yoga has a particular gift in that it helps quiet the mind. And not all exercise does that. So that is where, Bessel van der Kolk is saying, hey, like yoga is a lot more than just a practice. It's actually a healing path. So yeah,
All
there's a
right.
lot of benefits we get from yoga.
Yeah, that is cool. I used to do yoga like once a week, and I know I loved it at that time.
Yeah.
So I also want to ask, can you tell us a little bit more about the Be Strong, Be Wise program, and then tell us how it helps youngsters find out what they can and can't do, or this ethics around sexual activity.
Yeah.
And then I saw that there's three types of the programs: Be Strong and Be Wise. Can you explain those things?
Yes. You're asking all of the long-winded questions that take long-winded answers, Jeff. So I'll
Sorry.
try and be brief. No, this is great. I love when people ask about the program, and thank you for asking, because there's so much to say about it. And like I said, we've just got this beautiful data from a school we worked with where school-wide they're seeing less sexual aggression. So teenagers are in trouble. The Department of Ed has recently reported that the demographic most likely to experience assault are teenagers by other teenagers. So teenagers are at risk now more than ever. And if you think about what they're exposed to on TikTok and on the media and on pornography sites, which I hate to tell folks, but teenagers are going on pornography sites more than ever. We have lots of variables that are contributing to that, but I'll stick to the question. So what our program does is we try to speak to the integrity in each and every teenager. So we have a class that is all about self-knowledge and learning how your particular brain works, because every brain has a different defense system, like fight, flight, or freeze. And when teenagers understand what type they are, it's like emotional intelligence. It's like a new tool that they have to work with. So we really build that awareness in each individual teen. And then we talk about all kinds of components to sexual safety. And you mentioned alcohol earlier, Jeff, and that is probably the biggest variable affecting assault outcomes, because 63% of offenders were under the influence at the time of assault.
Yeah.
And 90% of offenders, actually that's not the right stat, 80% of offenders are known to the victim. So there's a relationship at stake. There's a whole potentially a power dynamic between the offender and the victim. And so equipping young people with the ability to know what their boundaries are and how to communicate them, how to, for example, be out with their friends on a Saturday night and everybody's drinking. This often happens in teen circles. How they can be out with their friends and still make safe choices. So some examples of that would be like if you see your friend who drank too much flirting with somebody else at the party and making them uncomfortable, that's your job to go step in as a friend and say, hey, uncool, let's go talk about this. You're making that person uncomfortable. So there's all kinds of role plays that we do. We do a lot of understanding, again, personal boundaries by looking at red flag signals. How do you listen to your intuition? What does unwanted sexual touch mean to you? And these are all things that teenagers don't really know, and they're not given the opportunity to explore because sex education in America currently is
Four.
fairly deplorable. So only 10 states in America, and teenagers are talking about this, only 10 states in our entire country teach sex education that is medically accurate. So normally sex ed is often given by a gym teacher in like an hour-long class. And they're learning about pregnancy and STD. Meanwhile, they're navigating an arena that is so multi-layered and contains, all kinds of misogyny and, anti-LGBTQ and all kinds of stuff. They're navigating on their phone and on their screens, that those types of sex education classes aren't meeting them where they're at. So we try and go in and fill that gray area, fill that void of what sex education's not doing, and that is teaching teens and young adults how to have healthy relationships and how to avoid toxic ones. And they deserve it. They deserve to know that.
Yeah. Wow. Tammy Joy, which that's not her actual last name. I think Guthrie is her actual last name. But she says she loves this topic, and thank you for talking about hard things, because that is lacking a lot of time in the schools, lacking a lot of time in our society. People don't want to talk about things that are difficult to hear.
Right. And sexual assault is still a taboo subject. And
Yeah.
so it's, and this is where we do a lot of work. You asked about our different programs. So we have a program for youth where we go in and we work in usually a health class. There's 5 classes in our youth course. So that's one of our courses. We also offer a train the trainer, which would be for a health teacher, for example, a PE teacher, or a counselor or a parent who wants to offer the program to their students. And then we have our parent program that's a workshop where we talk about how to have these kind of hard conversations with your children. Because as a lot of parents tell me, like, I'm the last person that my kid would talk to about sex. So they need, parents need some help with this too. It's a hard one.
Yeah, we have a question here from Tammy.
Okay.
She says, how can we teach parents how to respond when their child comes to them after being assaulted?
Oh, that's such a good question, Tammy. Thank you. Again, really hard. I often tell parents, because I've worked with a lot of parents who have had their child go through this, is that you as a parent have also been traumatized a little bit. And so doing that kind of self-care that you need to for yourself is really important. But we cannot push people beyond what they're ready for. And parents sometimes can do that. We can push our kids in ways that hurt them and in ways that they're not ready. So number one is just don't push your kid. Try and be a listening ear and make space for that listening when your child is ready. But asking, very kind of non-blaming questions around, what it is that would feel supportive for them, what it is that they need help with. I do think that teenagers are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. And oftentimes they know what it is that they need. It may not be what we think they need as parents, but they know what they need. And it may be that they need space. It may be that they need to have a fun movie night with the family. It may be that they need to be distracted a little bit, but just meeting that child where they're at with a lot of compassion and kindness and patience. And, one of the things that we talk about in the book and in the program is the opportunity to look for your mirrors. So when you've been assaulted, you've gone through a trauma like that, your mirrors are the people, places, and things that remind you of who you are at the core, right?
Yeah.
And so parents can help with that. And they won't necessarily say, let me help you with your mirrors. But they may say, like, hey, we haven't seen Aunt Ruth in a while. I know you really love hanging out with Aunt Ruth. Do you want to go make a date to go see Aunt Ruth? They're like something that they know would be soothing for the child. And the child might still say no, but the parent can be there offering it and provide that safe space.
That is amazing advice. So where can people go if they're looking to find support for these things?
Well, for sure, check out our website, Be Strong, Be Wise website. My personal website does have a link, but you're going to find a lot more information on the Be Strong, Be Wise site. People are welcome to reach out to me. There's a free consultation button on the website, so people are welcome to reach out to me. And there's a lot of really amazing resources out there. I mentioned Dr. Campbell, I mentioned Bessel van der Kolk, but there aren't a whole lot of programs or books that are totally designed for teenagers and young adults. And so I do think our program's pretty special in that regard. But that's just a very easy way to reach out to me.
Yeah. And do you have any social media or email addresses that you would like to give out? If not, it's totally fine, but I just want to check.
Yeah, so people can find me at amy@bestrongbewise.com. So it's really easy to remember, amy@bestrongbewise.com. We are on Instagram at bestrong_bewise. We are on Facebook, Be Strong, Be Wise. We are on LinkedIn. So we're all over the place. We were on Twitter. We're not on Twitter anymore. So anyway, so that's,
you're smart for that.
I have to say I was so bad at keeping up with it even before the changeover happened that it was like, oh, this is no biggie. But I thank you for that statement. Yeah, so important. It is never the victim's fault, ever. Also, the Me Too movement is alive and well, and that's a great resource for survivors as well. RAIN.org is a great resource. So there's lots out there.
That is great. I appreciate you offering the support to everybody out there. And I just find this to be educational to myself even, and I appreciate that. But we have ran out of time. So I want to say thank you again, Amy, for taking the time out of your busy evening to be here with me and my people. And I need each of you out there, including you, Amy, to do me a favor this week, next week, and for the rest of your life. I need you to make every second count. Why? Because you never know when the seconds are going to run out on your one life. Guys, I'll see you back here next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, don't forget, make every second count. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Jeff.